Hey guys, it's Fred. Thanks for joining me. This is going to be a solo video. Sheila's substitute teaching today, and I run across some items here, and I thought they'd be interesting to go over. I run across an old story where a fellow was interviewing Jean Hatfield, Shirley Jean Hatfield. She was the wife of Henry D. Hatfield, not Henry Drury Hatfield, the governor or the senator, but Henry D. Hatfield, the son of Tennis Hatfield, the brother to Jack Hatfield and Tennis Jr. And Henry and Jean Hatfield, they owned the Hatfield Monument Company there at Sarah Ann for years and years. In fact, they were the ones that made the, very few people's been there because it is off limits. Sheila and I try to go every year for Memorial Day, but they made the Hatfield Monument Company actually made the monument for the 6 McCoy children that are buried at Hardy on the John and Barbara Vance property. Of course, it was McCoy property at the time, and over the years it's been sold, and John and Barbara Vance own it now. And that's the big monument that's there representing the 3 children that were killed at the Pawpaw Tree down at Buskirk. That was Tolbert, Palmer, and Ranald Jr. And then the 2 children that was killed at the cabin, and that was Alifair and Calvin. And then Wilm is on that monument. Wilm was the one that they were supposed to have gotten that was in the fight that day. They should have taken him instead of Ranald Jr., but they grabbed the wrong one. So they killed a 15-year-old boy, totally innocent. They got the wrong one. He wasn't even in the fight. He didn't know anything about it. And Wilm froze to death at the gravesite from sorrow, from sadness. He felt guilty that Ranald Jr. had died in his stead. So that's the big monument there from Henry and Jean. The boys bought it from Joseph and Leonard McCoy, bought and paid for that big monument. They owned McCoy Coal Company there at Phelps for years and done quite well. They're the ones responsible, them and Jimmy Wofford, for the Hatfield McCoy lamps and for the Hatfield McCoy album that Jimmy Wofford done. They financed all that. They were big friends with Jimmy Wofford throughout the years, along with my father, of course. Jimmy and my dad was real good friends. Anyway, I don't want to get off topic here. I'll start wondering. See if I can get this lighting fixed. I know I'm getting a glare. Oh, that's from the computer probably. So what follows is part 1 of my interview with Jean, which occurred August the 7th of 2001. And the fellow that's doing the interviewing, he asked Jean, he said, you were telling me about some of the things that you have, family things, and he says like guns and gun modes and knives and things like that belong to the Hatfields. And of course, as you can see here in the shop, I've got all kinds of photographs. I still have more. I just don't have the room to display them all. See, Jean, after 1976, that's when Jimmy Wofford, Willis Hatfield, and several that had gone to the dedication there at Hardy Park, they all came to Blackberry Supermarket after they left Hardy Park. And I've got some interesting stories on that about guns and different things. And I may someday tell them, just to put them on video, and they came to Blackberry Supermarket to see Mother and my grandmother's collection. Now, my grandmother of course, was, she was out of it by then. She was, you know, older and Alzheimer's and different things like that. But she, they had came there. I was just reminiscing. They had came to the supermarket to see some of my mother's collection. And that's what it was called. It was called a Hatfield McCoy collection at the time. It was then because some of the people that was there that day told Mother, said, you should open a museum. You've got some good items. And it wasn't just my mother's items. It was my grandmother's too. And they all liked it. And after that, it was some time after, it was probably a year, maybe close to a year. But Jean Hatfield opened a Hatfield Museum over in Sarah Ann. She I took a little trailer and she put some of the items that Devil Ants and Tennis and Cap and different ones had, and into a little trailer, and they sold pictures of Devil Ants and different ones, and started a little Hatfield Museum, just right there at the cemetery, just at the Hatfield Cemetery, just right around the curve there a little bit, was that trailer. And so this guy here, he's asking about guns or anything that she might have, and she said, you can see I've got all kinds of pictures. Then she talks about some of the guns that Devil Ants had. And then he says, which one of those boys was your father-in-law? See, because she had married Henry D. Hatfield. And Henry D's father was Tennis. And she says here, Tennis. That was Devil Ants and Lavasse's youngest son. He was just like 6 years or 7 years old when the feud was going on. Now, Tennis was born in 1890. If you remember, in 1890, well, was born in 1890 when the feud was going on. Feud ended with the hanging of Cotton Top, February the 18th, 1890. I think Tennis was born in July, maybe. Let me see if I got that anywhere. Yeah, born July the 28th of 1890, and he died August the 13th, 1953. He was 63 years old. So, you know, she says up here, and all I'm trying to do here, I'm not trying to be ill. I'm not trying to be, you know, there was a time that I get real trying to prove other people wrong, and people took that the wrong way. I wasn't trying to be rude or Mr. Know-It-All. I was just trying to correct misinformation. Some people took that wrong. And if they did, I'm sorry, but at least the right information is out there, because we did correct a lot of it. Sheila's got over 500 Hatfield McCoy videos on her channel and in her collection. So she says that the boy, which one of Devil Ants' sons did you marry? And, or was your father-in-law? And she says Tennis's boy, Devil Ants' youngest son. He was just 6 or 7 years old when the feud was going on. See, that's not true. That's incorrect. When the feud was going on, Tennis wasn't even born. That is the reason that Big Jim McCoy made friends with Tennis in 1928, shook hands with him in Pikeville. That was peace treaty. That was the truce. The official peace treaty. The official truce between the Hatfields and McCoys, and that was the oldest son of Randall McCoy, Jim McCoy, and the youngest son of Devil Ants Hatfield. We've talked about it. We've got videos on it, because some people say Jim McCoy was the peacemaker. Jim McCoy was not the peacemaker. He made peace in the end with Tennis. But the peacemaker they're talking about is Sam McCoy, when he was on these raids looking for looking for Crazy Jim Vance, Cap Hatfield, after they burnt the cabin down Sam McCoy's the one that held everybody back and said, guys, you said you wasn't going to do this. If we're going to harm women and children, I'm going to go back home. We said we wouldn't fire on nobody unless they fired on us, and so forth. He gave a pep talk to all the people that was in that posse after they had burnt Randall McCoy's cabin down and killed 2 more of his children. That was Sam McCoy. Sam McCoy was the peacemaker. In the end, Jim McCoy shook hands and called peace. Feud was over. The feud ended with the hanging of Cotton Top Hatfield, the son of Ellison and Harriet, his first cousin. That was their son. He was mentally challenged. They hung him on February the 18th, 1890. That was it. Feud was over. Hard feelings hung around, but feuding, the fighting, the killing was over with the hanging of Cotton Top. So where Gene says that he was 6 or 7 years old when the feud was going on, wasn't even born. He wasn't born until July of 1890. Cotton Top was hung in February of 1890. The feud was over. That's why Big Jim McCoy shook hands with him. That's why Big Jim McCoy didn't hold him responsible for any of the deaths or feuding or fighting with the McCoys. He wasn't even born till after Cotton Top had been hung. Because Jim McCoy said he'd never forgive them. He would never forgive the West Virginia Hatfields and their kin for what they did to his family. That's what he says in the newspaper. We did a video on it, several videos. But it was Big Jim McCoy in tennis who shook hands in 1928 and friends. No hard feelings. Jim McCoy died the following year. He died in 1929. And the feud actually started. She says here, she's telling this fella, she says the feud actually started around 1886. So he was just a little boy. No, he wouldn't have been a little boy. He wasn't even born till 1890. And the feud didn't start in 1886. The feud started 1863 with the desertion of Devil Anse Hatfield during the Civil War. He deserted at least February. That's when the paperwork shows up that he deserted in February of 1863. That's when the hard feelings started, because everybody in that unit was either killed or taken prisoner of war. Randall McCoy, my great-great-uncle. Uriah McCoy, my great-great-grandfather. Uriah McCoy's sister married Randall McCoy. So Randall McCoy and Uriah McCoy were brother-in-laws and first cousins. So that was the hard feelings, was 1863 during the Civil War. What didn't desert with Devil Anse was either killed, taken prisoner of war. 1865, assassination of Asa Harmon McCoy. That's when Jim Vance, Devil Anse Hatfield, tracked either Pete, their slave, Pete, through the snow. And when he took Asa Harmon's victuals to him, he was hiding in a cave. Or his wife, Patsy. Somebody had taken Asa Harmon's food to him that morning. And when Devil Anse and Crazy Jim Vance showed up along with some more of the Tug Valley desperados, they followed their footprints through the snow to see where they went. And that's where they found Asa Harmon and killed him. That was 1865. 1867, Ellison Hatfield and 3 of his friends were charged and found guilty of stealing 4 pigs off of Asa Peter McCoy. Not Asa Harmon, but Asa Peter. A lot of Asas back then. There was an Asa McCoy that was Selkirk's father. That Asa was actually the father to Selkirk McCoy. He actually lived on the West Virginia side there at Red Jacket, what's now known as, not Red Jacket, I'm sorry, but Blackberry City. Asa Peter McCoy, Asa Harmon McCoy, Asa McCoy, and then there was another Asa McCoy, the son of Uriah and Aunt Betty. That's my great-grandfather. That Asa McCoy married Nancy Hatfield, the daughter of Preacher Aunt Hatfield. That's how I'm half and half. My great-grandmother was Nancy Hatfield. Great-grandfather was Asa McCoy. But anyway, in 1867, Ellison Hatfield and 3 of his friends stole 4 pigs from Asa Peter McCoy. Had to pay them, had to repay them for the pigs. 1882 escalated to the next level. That's when a lot of people think 1882 is when the feud started. That's the highest part of the feud, excluding the cabin massacre. That's when it started to really escalate. They had to fight. You had 2 fights at the election ground there at Blackberry, just across the street from where my great-grandfather's cabin. Now there's a replica cabin there where Preacher Aunt Hatfield lived. Over across the creek on the other side, there was a fight. Tolbert McCoy and Bad Elias Hatfield got in a fight. They were all drunk. They got through fighting. Tolbert got the better of them, and Ellison Hatfield from West Virginia at a Kentucky election, drunk, stood up and said, "Try that on me." 2 drunks, a challenge, fight was on. He done been in one fight. Ellison's getting the better of him, pulled a knife. He pulled his knife. Ellison's knife closed on his hand. He dropped it. Tolbert continued to stab Ellison. Through the years, you'll hear him say, "Oh, the McCoy boys stabbed him. The McCoy boys, they ganged up on him." It's hard for me to believe that a bunch of Hatfields, West Virginia Hatfields, or Kentucky, stood around and watched 3 McCoy boys fight with Ellison Hatfield and not jump in, and them with guns and knives. But be it as it may, that was 1882. And then 1885, of course, they killed Jeff McCoy. Jeff McCoy was the one that they shot from across the river after he swam across Tug River and got to the other side. They shot and killed him. That was Asa Harmon. That was his son. That was Nancy Hatfield's brother. Nancy McCoy. Nancy Hatfield married Chauncey, went on to marry Frank Phillips. That was her brother. That was 1885. So and of course 1888 was the cabin massacre. That was the big part. But she says up here, Jean does, that the feud started in 1886. Didn't start in 86. And Tennis wasn't buried till 1890, or born. She says they were kind people, but I think that they just didn't like to be pushed around. She's talking about Devil Ants and Levice and West Virginia Hatfields. Right now, everybody's that way. They'll give you anything they got, but just don't try to take it. See, guys, there's all kinds of rumors that Randall McCoy and Devil Ants was in timber business together. No. That Randall McCoy and his father was in timber business and competed against Devil Ants. No. That Randall McCoy had timbered a bunch of timber off of Devil Ants' property and they got mad. No. Nobody took nothing. Nobody took nothing from Devil Ants. Randall McCoy didn't. Those hard feelings were caused by Devil Ants and a bunch of his family members deserting in the heat of battle during the Civil War. They got on their horses and they rode off while the other men continued to fight and were killed, maimed, taken POW. Says here they like dealing with people. She's talking about the West Virginia Hatfields, Devil Ants' family. They like dealing with people. Most of them were storekeepers. 2 of Grandpa's sons were doctors. Now, She calls, throughout her interview, she calls Devil Ants and Levacy Grandma and Grandpa. She says 2 of Grandpa's sons were doctors. Could be wrong, and if I am, please put it in the comments because we want to be right. But Elliot Hatfield was the only one that I knew of that was a doctor. If I'm wrong, please correct me with proof. Who was the other one? Put it in the comments. I made a note there. Of course, Tennis, she says, of course, Tennis was sheriff. Joe was the sheriff. Well, both were involved in criminal activity while they were sheriffs. Both of them had Cap Hatfield sworn in as a deputy sheriff under them. Imagine that. Imagine Cap Hatfield, a man that had Kentucky warrants on him for murdering several people throughout the years, escaped jail, on the run, different things. His brothers become the sheriffs in different terms in Logan County, and they make him a deputy. Says here that they liked dealing with people, she did. Most of them were storekeepers and so forth. Lice and Troy were storekeepers, she said. So they always were dealing with the public. Storekeepers. If you remember, Elias and Troy were killed by Jerome. Can't think of his full name there right now. Drawing a blank. But the Italian over turf of who was bootlegging, who was selling their whiskey to a bar, a certain bar in Boomer, West Virginia. But she says that they liked dealing with people, and they were storekeepers, and they were good at dealing with the public. She says, you don't deal with the public without repercussions if you're mean. Well, Tennis and Joe both had to give up the sheriff's office. Tennis went on to burn the home place down, burn his Blue Goose, the bar, up at Barnabas. Of course, Cat, Troy, and Elias were shot and killed in a shootout over liquor. She says they had no issues getting along with nobody. See, it wasn't just the McCoys, because Cap went on to shoot all kinds of different people. They feuded. Cap and Elliot, his brother, they feuded. They didn't get along. So it wasn't just a Hatfield McCoy thing, West Virginia Hatfield McCoy thing. It was just, they didn't get along. Contrary to what Jane says here, that they got along with everybody, they didn't get along with nobody. People feared them. They got along, the ones they got along with, they got along with them because they feared them. This fella Asker says, do you know where the fort was? You know, there's an old saying, old story out there that says Devil Ants had built a fort. I think what he had wasn't just no cabin that some of the work hands would sleep in. And I think that's probably what they're calling a fort. But let's go with her answer. Do you know where the fort was? This fella asked Gene Hatfield. I've never figured that out. I don't know where it was at. There may have been one over on Beach Creek or Bend Creek, over in that area, but as far as I know, the family's telling me it didn't ever exist. See, she lived, the Devil Ants' home place is right above where her museum was. Her museum was right down there near the cemetery. The cemetery is just right down the road from Devil Ants' home place. She says she never knew nothing about a fort, a so-called fort. People like to use word of mouth until it doesn't G with their preferred story. Then they conveniently forget the stories like this. See, this story's out there. This is her story, but you'll never hear nobody talk about it. You'll never hear nobody say there was no fort. That was just something written in books or somebody made up because she lived there. She says she knows these people. She married into the family. She grew up with them. I know their house was built back off the road, she says. Well, back at that time, there wasn't a road. You had to go down to the creek to get anywhere and trespass on other people's property to get to Logan. I think this road went in here in 1932 or 38. Well, she thinks the road went in 32 or 38. Miss Shirley Jean Hatfield wasn't born until 1936. She says, but even when Henry's father put the monument up for Grandpa, there was no road here. That was in 1928. And they had to use mules and sleds and everything else to get that stone up on the mountain. Now, she's saying here that Henry's father, which was Tennis, helped Devil Anse put the monument up on the hill. But even when Henry's father put the monument up for Grandpa, there was no road. That was 1928. And they had to use mules and sleds. See, Joe Hatfield, the sheriff of Logan County, if you go to the May 22nd, 1944 Life magazine, you'll see him standing there in front of the monument looking at it with his son. Life magazine did a story on it. Joe said he helped helped his father put the monument up on the hill. And the photo shows Chauncey's grave right next to it. Joe Hatfield said that he helped Devil Anse. That Devil Anse was always combing his beard. And that he helped them. They had to use sleds and blocking tackles and different things to get that monument up on the hill. And his dad told him, so let's put it right here. This looks like a good dry place for a grave. That's what Joe Hatfield said. Tennis's brother. Another one of Devil Anse's sons. She says here it was 1928. Devil Anse died in 1921. Chauncey Hatfield died 14 months after Devil Anse. April 1922. At Chauncey's funeral, you'll see people gathered around for Chauncey's funeral. Fresh flowers on the grave, freshly dug grave. You look to the left, there's Devil Anse's monument. That's 1922. So we know it was there in 1922. Joe Hatfield says that he helped his dad take it up on the hill, and he said this would be a good dry place for a grave. I believe Joe Hatfield. I believe Devil Anse put the monument up, ordered the monument. It says in the paperwork that they sent to Washington, D.C. to have the cemetery declared a National Historical Site, that the family put the monument there in 1925. 21, 22, 25, 28. See, a lot of stuff that's come about through the years has been written down by different people. And it's just like whispering something to somebody and then them whispering it and so on. It gets changed throughout the years. And that's what's happened to the feud history. This gentleman asked her, he says, what year was your husband born? And Jean says, he was born in 25. She's correct. 1925 when Henry was born. Jack Hatfield, Tennis's other son, was born in 1922. Handsome Jack Hatfield was Stephen Hatfield's father. Grandpa died in 1921, she says. He didn't remember him, but he remembered his grandmother. Grandma died in 28. Well, we can see why Tennis didn't, or not Tennis, but we can see why Henry, her husband, didn't remember his grandpa, Devil Anse. Devil Anse died in 1921. Henry wasn't born until 1925. So he didn't remember him because he wasn't born yet. Now she says, but he remembered his grandmother. Grandma died in 1928. See, if I'm not mistaken, and I very well could be, it was 28 or 29. You can Google Levacy Hatfield. So she would have been 3 years old, 2 or 3 years old, according to when she died. Or, not her, but Henry, rather. Henry would have been 3 or 4 years old. 2 to 4 years old, let's say. I don't remember nobody when I was 3 years old. She said he remembered his grandmother. Devil Anse's home burned, right? Did they lose a lot of things in it? This gentleman's asking her. Devil Anse's home burned down? Did they lose a lot? It had a lot of things in it. Somebody said Tennis had stored a lot of guns and ammunition, things like that. People were afraid to go there for a week afterwards because shots were going off. There was no fire department. See, guys, here's the deal. Tennis burnt that house down, according to Stephen Hatfield and others, for the insurance money. If he's going to burn it down for the insurance money, do you think he left everything inside that, all those guns? Now, there may have been some shots going off. There may have been some bullets left in there. You think he burned everything? If he's trying to get money, would he burn money up? Would he burn guns that he could sell? Would he burn furniture that he could sell? Would he burn valuables? No. He wouldn't, which we've covered that in some of our other videos. Did you ever hear what year the house was built? She says 1889. That's a replica of it. She must have been showing him a picture of it. It was a 7-room, 2-story house. Cap's was built on the same pattern. See, Sheila and I went over there years and years and years ago researching before the movie ever come out, Hatfield McCoy, before it was made a big historical thing. Cap's house was still standing at that time. Over the years, just like the Hatfield cabin, Preacher Anse's cabin at the foot of Blackberry Mountain, more and more and more. Every year it would lean. Finally it fell in. Used to ride the school bus. Every day we'd go to school and you'd see his house and Polly, Preacher Anse and Polly's house, cabin. And it deteriorated more and more. And finally it fell in. Same way with Cap's house. Cap's house was once standing proud. Did your husband read a lot about the feud? Mostly, but he disagreed with a lot of it, Jean says. The Altina Waller book, he liked that one. It was a good one. They interviewed him on the History Channel. She never interviewed anyone. She went with public record on everything. Now, she's talking about Altina Waller. Anybody that's ever seen our stories on Altina Waller, where we correct things, you'll find that the reason the Hatfields, the West Virginia Hatfields, like Altina Waller's book is because Altina Waller favored West Virginia Hatfields. They did no wrong. It was just a rough time back then. They did no wrong because the Hatfields were the only ones that were talking. West Virginia Hatfields. The West Virginia Hatfields were bullies. West Virginia Hatfields were mean. And she wrote her book favoring the West Virginia Hatfields. She also wrote her book because she copied from other book writers. Otis Rice, for one. Newspapers, different things like that. Jean says, I think a lot of it was Perry Klein. Grandpa had sued him because he had got on Grandpa's land and timbered it. See, remember, you've also heard over the years where Randall McCoy and his father had gotten on Devil Anse's land and timbered it and got sued. Not true. no lawsuit, no court. Grandpa won 5,000 acres of land from Perry Klein. Really? To this day, we've never seen a court case. We've never seen a court document. We've never seen a settlement, a guilty, anything like that at all. But you'll hear about this 5,000 acres and this court lawsuit all through life. Didn't happen. Spoken into history. And here it's written into history by this gentleman. And this gentleman's supposed to be a historian. After that, all the warrants and bounty hunters started looking for Grandpa and the boys. Said after Devil Anse had sued Perry Klein, that then all the trouble started. Everybody was looking for Devil Anse. Really? Well, this was supposed to be in the 70s, 1870s, when this happened. The warrants for Devil Anse and Cap and Johnson and all of them, they didn't come out till 1882. They didn't come out till they tied the 3 McCoy boys to the trees and were indicted, 20 of them, for murder. Waited all those years for Perry Klein to get revenge on that. But hold on. Grandpa decided all of a sudden that he was just going to sell him the land to get rid of it. And when he did that, everything stopped. Everything stopped with the hanging of Cocktop. Everything stopped with the Supreme Court ruling that Kentucky could no longer go over into West Virginia and serve warrants and arrest the Hatfields. Had nothing to do with no land or Perry Klein or Devil Anse or a lawsuit. See, that right there is just spoken into history. And it goes and goes. This is probably going to be a two-parter. I'm already at 37 minutes. Not going to drag it out. Probably done lost half of you. Unless you're a true historian and you want to know the other side or you want to know facts. I have no reason to lie either way. In fact, if you see anything that I've said wrong or incorrect, please correct it in the comments with proof so I can correct it. Because that's what we want to do, is we want to put out the correct history. Not just hearsay, not just what somebody wrote in a book years ago to sell a book, or especially family members now, because you got to remember, a lot of the books was written by West Virginia Hatfields and their family. Not likely somebody's going to write a book, get on there and put their family down. It's just not likely to happen. This will be part 1 of this. I'll finish up with part 2 later on. Thank you, guys. Please like, subscribe, and share.